Welcome into Boxing Scene Today. Well, Halloween is upon us. We know what that means. It means lots of candy. It means lots of kids running around. Also means we think about everything scary in life. Well, guess what? We're in a scary business, which is boxing. And a lot of fighters are so good at beating you before the bell even rings. We'll go over our list today of scariest fighter of all time. To help me go through it, of course, Jimmy Smith in studio. We are joined by Chris Algieri, Paulie Malignaggi, and Coach Robert Garcia. I found a top 10 list in no particular order of the scariest boxers of all time. I'm going to throw some at you. You tell me what you think. I got to go with my number one all time. This is my number one. My number one has to be Roberto Duran. Maybe it's because of the age I am. That guy scared the crap out of me, was an incredibly dangerous puncher, and had this ability, Chris, to project machismo. You're not enough man to come fight me. One of the scariest guys of all time. Chris, am I wrong?
No, he was actually my number one even before you said it. When this came up, I was like, nah, Roberto Duran's the scariest guy out there because not only was Roberto Duran the machismo and that he looked like he had the devil in his eyes, he was damn good. So even if we're just dealing with an animal, you're dealing with a super sophisticated animal because his ability in there to make that ring small, to make you miss, to make you pay, to fight on the inside, the outside, middle distance, everything. The guy was just so dangerous in every part of that ring. So that being in a ring with that kind of guy, he just makes the ring smaller and smaller and smaller. Okay, maybe I'm gonna outbox him. Nah, and then he starts outboxing you. All right, well, I can hit him. I can't hit him either. So that on top of having stone hands, manos de piedra, the guy obviously hits hard, super dangerous in every way. And afterwards, he's gonna try and steal your woman. So that's another thing that's even scarier.
Yeah, Paul, didn't he have some of the best press conference moments of all time? I mean, Sugar Ray Leonard said candidly, goes, I was scared of the guy. He terrified me before our first fight. Paulie, that's not easy to do, man.
Yeah, especially at that level. Here's the thing with this guy.
Yeah.
I met him as an old man, and he's like a grandfatherly figure
Oh,
now. So it feels so different to know that, to watch the old videos on YouTube and the interviews and see like, oh, this guy was a scumbag. But that's how he made that's by how he buttered his bread. You got to have your game face. Once you become a fighter, you kind of understand that side of it as well. It's everybody has a different psychology to the way they fight and the way they approach a fight. And that was the way Duran approached the fight. But post-retirement, he really does have like a grandfatherly feel. He's super nice to everybody. Never turns down a picture or an autograph. Super, super cool guy. So, that sometimes people, they lighten up in their older age. But during his career, I'll tell you what made this guy more scary too, is he was a scumbag even after the fight. Like he wouldn't,
oh,
and like you see his fights against Leonard in the first Sugar Ray Leonard fight, where Leonard goes to tap him 5 after the 15th round. He tells him basically go F off, like get out of here. I don't need, like the fight's over, dude. You don't have to keep hating the guy. And then even the Wilfred Benitez fight, and Benitez actually had just outboxed him and beat him, and he wouldn't shake his hand, because Benitez apparently didn't fight a manly enough fight toe to toe with him. He chose to beat him cerebrally. So for Duran, he couldn't accept that. So he's like, no, I don't need to be your friend. I don't need to congratulate you. I don't like you. And that's the thing. He could beat you, but then like the fight was never over because if you beat him, he's holding a grudge against you. So the fights are over. Even later on in his career, when he had the rivalry with Vinny Paz,
yep.
that
Yep.
rivalry with Vinny Paz is so underrated because he's a little bit past it, but it's still an evenly matched up rivalry. They couldn't stand each other because Paz is a crazy trash talker. Duran could get in your head. That rivalry in itself is one of the underrated rivalries because they both just were at each other's throats.
What I will never forget, Coach Garcia, is after he beat Leonard in the first fight, and Leonard throws his hands up, he shoves Leonard and hits him like, I'm too much man for you, dude. Garcia, Coach, we all remember that. That was an amazing moment, right?
That's Duran, and that was his performances. That was the way he fought. That was his mentality before and after the fights. But as a person, I've had a few times, that I spent some time with him in New York, just recently, and he's a great person, man. We've had a
Yeah,
couple of years
such a nice
together.
guy.
He's
Yeah.
he's a great dude. He's a nice guy. But look, scary when it comes to scary. I don't know if you guys, how close have you guys been to Mike Tyson?
I was gonna say that next.
That dude was
Yeah.
Coach
scary. I
Garcia,
fought on his cards,
yeah,
Paulie. I
yeah.
fought on his cards, and when he beat Holyfield's ear off, I fought on that card. And
Oh man, you
we
did.
were backstage in the locker room when he was walking out of that out to his locker room. His eyes were red. It was scary, man. It was scary. Plus press conferences. You got to be scary when you were saying
I'll F you till you
Chris, you
love
were
me.
saying, Chris, you were saying, Duran is going to take your girlfriend. Tyson was gonna eat your kids.
Yeah.
Tyson, Tyson wants to screw you so bad until you love him.
Yeah, dude. It's
You know what I mean? That shit's scary.
right.
Does-
Paulie, I got to go back to the grandpa Mike Tyson that we know now is almost like inconceivable if
Yeah.
you saw his fights in the 80s and 90s because he was an animal, man, an animal.
I get
It
it.
was scary, man. I'm telling you guys, it was scary just being around him by the way he used to talk to people, the way the press conferences. You didn't even want to have a conversation with him because you didn't know if he was going to try to slap you or bite you you don't know. You wanted to stay away from him.
I remember seeing a stand-up with Jamie Foxx about Mike Tyson. Obviously, everybody's seen Jamie Foxx imitate Mike Tyson. He does a great imitation, but
Yep.
I remember Jamie Foxx, and I'm not gonna do it no justice doing the imitation because I'm not Jamie Foxx, and the delivery Jamie Foxx does is amazing. But he was talking about Mike Tyson, how scary Mike Tyson is, and he was basically saying Mike Tyson in this room full of people right now. If Mike Tyson walked in right now, Mike Tyson is like a pit bull with no leash. He goes, you see Mike Tyson, you're like, yo, dog, that pit bull ain't got no leash. And, and he's basically running left and right, like, yo, dog, check it, that pit bull ain't got no leash, man. Because you never know how he's gonna react in that era, you know. And I'll tell you what, the first era prior to going to jail, he was even scarier because nobody was beating him.
Yeah.
Nobody was beating him, and he was just destroying, running through guys. And some of those wins he has are based on intimidation. I mean, Calvin Williams
a lot of them
showed up, like basically went down without being hit. Even later, Bruce Seldon barely got hit and went down.
Frank Bruno was terrified.
Frank Bruno was terrified. At least Frank Bruno was somewhat full, but yes, he was terrified. Alex Stewart, some of those knockouts, his reputation became so devastating that some of those knockouts, he's beaten full-blown top 10 heavyweights on intimidation. I mean, it was a different feel. And when you weren't intimidated by him, let me tell you, he still didn't care. Because if you remember the Razor-Ruddock rivalry, when he had two great fights with Razor-Ruddock, Ruddock was in his face constantly, and they were both talking trash. Again, that's one of those other underrated rivalries, Tyson and Ruddock. The press conferences to those were amazing, too. They almost came to blows on one of the press conferences. And, he was basically... the way he would talk in trash, he'd say, "Kiss me with those big lips."
It was nuts where Mike would go.
Being feminine and them not being man enough, and different era, different times. But either way, the way he tried to get in your head, and the psychology of battle. It's like everybody's approach is different, and he was a bit psychotic with that psychology.
Now, Chris, since we're on the subject of heavyweights, somebody who makes everybody's list, Sonny Liston, who wasn't just a bad guy in the ring, his style where he could knock your teeth out with a jab. He was also mobbed up. He was a mean guy outside of the ring as well. Everybody was terrified of this guy back in the day, Chris. No one thought Cassius Clay, Muhammad Ali had an absolute chance against him, but people forget how intimidating Sonny Liston was.
Absolutely. He's one of those guys, he'll rob you in the fight and then rob you after the fight. Like he's going to mug you. He's going to mug you during the ring because he's just rough. He's just physical, hit you with those sledgehammer hands. He'll beat you down. And he had that aura too. And he was preceding Mike Tyson, obviously, but he had that aura of a bad boy, bad man, the baddest man on the planet, heavyweight champion of the world, big, mean, doesn't say a whole lot. Handles it in the ring, but also to your point, I mean, the fact that he was mobbed up, the fact that he was literally a criminal outside of the ring, he'll physically hurt you outside there. He was in the ring, and he'll hurt you afterwards.
Liston was a criminal muscle for the mob, and it was kind of known. It was like outright known. Today, they wouldn't put you on TV if they knew you had those connections. Back then, it was like kind of known. It was like boxing was his side job. His main job was
he's a leg breaker
for the mafia.
But this idea that a coach that he had mastered the psychology of beating you before you got in there. George Foreman, who's also on this list, of course, said Sonny Liston is the most intimidating guy I ever met in boxing. That says a lot, Coach.
Yeah. I agree with that, man. It is one of those situations where you do have to be scared, before and after, because that's just the way they are. Some people, a lot of fighters are like that during the press conferences to sell the fight. Sometimes they're even told by the promoters, we got to sell the fight, we got to act like this, we got to push, we got to do this, we got to do that. But Liston and Tyson and all those guys we're talking about, they were like that. That was their attitude. Look, they had, we're talking about connections with mobs and stuff like that. If we had somebody now at this moment like a Chavez Jr. who would be scary, and they've had those connections, he would be one of those scariest guys too because of the connections they have outside of boxing, the connections they have with their family and stuff like that. but we don't have, obviously we don't have that in Chavez personality. He's a great person, but somebody like Liston, who was scary, who was a gangster, who
He
was
played the role.
scary after, then you gotta be worried about those guys.
Yeah,
Well,
and you're worried about beating a guy like that because what can
Yeah,
happen to
you
you afterwards? Your family is in
exactly,
trouble.
exactly.
another.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Paulie.
No, I mean, in those days, if you were told to throw a fight, you got to throw a fight. You didn't.
Yeah.
It wasn't a
Yeah.
question. You either did it or you
Yes.
didn't. Or you did it.
Of course, some of his fights, because he was so mobbed up, have come under scrutiny in the last few years, to say the least. A fighter on this.
The Ali rematch.
The Ali rematch is
Yeah.
number one, right? And of course, there are rumors because his death, he died of an overdose. His body wasn't discovered for a long time. That he had refused to throw a fight against Chuck Wepner, and that led to his demise, is one way to put it. But
Demise.
a lot of stuff, a lot of rumors around Sonny Liston. Another fighter on this list, one of my favorite of all times, one of the most underrated fighters, Aaron Hawk Pryor. Talk about a mean dude. Paulie, Aaron Pryor was just a mean guy, and he almost dared you to punch him out. He dared you to trade with him, and most fighters couldn't. Aaron Pryor, underrated, yes or no?
From a personal standpoint,
Please.
fighters that don't stop are
Yeah.
always intimidating. Like because you see them on video, you're preparing to fight them, and you see them on video, and you're like, man, the intensity of a person like this. Am I ever going to get a chance to breathe in this fight? It can really play on your mind. And the Hulk Pryor had that. He had that mentality where it was like you knew you were going to fight him. You knew you were in for a long night. Either way, it's like, man, am I going to be able to breathe in this fight? Am I going to be able to, have a moment in this fight? Or is it going to be a drag through the mud type of fight the entire time and I have to figure out a way to win it? We get being dragged through the mud the whole time. And that can be intimidating in and of itself. And that's what Hulk Pryor had. Hulk Pryor had that style where it was a real drag out type of fight. He'd force you to fight and fight and fight even when you didn't want to fight. And eventually he'd beat the fight out of you. And if we see even the Alexa Arguello rivalry, that's pretty much how it ended.
Yeah, but when you look at it, Coach, I was about to ask you about that. Alexa Arguello, one of my favorite fighters of all time and one of the greatest scientific boxers of all time, let himself be counted out because he just couldn't keep up with Aaron Pryor. What does that say about, as Paulie says, his tenacity, Coach?
Look, Alex Arguello, one of my favorites. Also, I actually named one of my sons Alexis because of Alex Arguello, because he is one of my favorites. But Aaron Pryor was just one of those scary guys. One thing that I want to bring up to you guys, in my gym here in Moreno Valley, California, Riverside County, my son, my other coaches, that we always talk about, when are we gonna find an Aaron Pryor and walk into the gym. We need an Aaron Pryor. My son studies boxing. He loves the sport, and he says we need an Aaron Pryor in this gym. And it's true, man. That was just one of those guys that, man, you want to have around because of how badass they are, but they are scary in the ring. They are scary not only inside and outside of the ring. So yeah, it doesn't have to be in my gym. I would love to see another Aaron Pryor somewhere in boxing.
Yeah, and Chris, when you look at Aaron Pryor, if you know his story, didn't make the Olympic team, was upset by Howard Davis. He always had a chip on his shoulder. He felt like everybody kind of got the attention he didn't get, and that's what made him so mean. And a lot of the fighters we're talking about have that in them. They just have a chip on their shoulder. They've been overlooked, and it makes them mean in and out of the ring.
Yeah, he was also at a time in betweener weight class between lightweight and welterweight. Junior welterweight is not a big marquee weight class like it's become now. And so back then he was always kind of getting looked over, and he did have that chip on his shoulder, and he brought it into the gym because of the fantastic shape that he always showed up in on fight night, and he brought it into the fight. And to your point, Champ, I want to piggyback off what you're saying. He would bring you to the brink, because he was willing to look in those dark spaces. He wanted to bring you in there with him. I've been to this darkness. Have you been there? Okay, let's find out. And if you've been there, how long can you stay in there? How long can you hold your breath underwater? He's the kind of guy who's going to beat you, break you mentally. And he did that to Alexis Arguello, who also was one of my favorite fighters. My grandfather was the first fighter I ever heard of, because my grandfather loved him. I hate those fights. It breaks my heart to watch Arguello lose the way he did to Aaron Pryor. But that second fight, he just didn't have it in him to go to those dark places anymore. He was older. It was his fourth weight class, and he was just in there with a guy that just did not stop. So when you're talking about scary fighters, Aaron Hawk Pryor absolutely is terrifying.
Last one we will talk about is a guy, not much of a trash talker, not really a bad guy outside of the ring, but when he put on that hat that said war, you knew that Marvin Hagler was coming to get it. He was a fearsome competitor, hated to lose, but as far as intimidation factor goes, Coach, Hagler was one of those guys, as Paulie said, the guy that, God, is this going to be a war? Against Hagler, you knew it'd be a war every time.
Every time you go into the ring against Hagler, and fans watching Hagler knew what he was all about. He was the one guy that inside the ring was very scary, but outside was a great person. You know, he wasn't one of those guys like we're talking about Pryor or Tyson, or that in outside of the ring they're talking, they're scaring people. I think it was totally the opposite. I think when the bell rang, he was scary. You know, you didn't want to be in front of him, and if you were, you had to be as talented or as brave as him to try to even compete against him, because that was him. You know, Hagler was one of those scary guys. You know, he's probably, you know, he's the last one we mentioned. He's probably one of the top three scariest guys, because when the bell rings, he was scary.
Now, Chris, you showed me a picture. You ran into him, I guess, when you were on vacation. Not a surprisingly small guy at middleweight.
Yeah.
When you look at his career and the guys he beat, that's incredible.
Yeah, and the fear of Marvin Hagler comes from his intensity, and his intensity, not just in the way that he fought, but everything he brought to it. The intensity of his stare downs, the intensity of him being in your face, the intensity of the press conference, the intensity of meeting that guy in the middle of the ring, and then everyone's going to leave that ring except for you and him, and he's going to be across that ring from you, thinking about that, and then you know what? In the 15th round, he's still coming on, and that's what's so scary about him, because. And on top of the intensity is the fact that it was genuine. He put himself what he called penitentiary. That's what training camp was. He wanted to suffer. He wanted to cause himself physical harm. So when he got into the ring, number one, there's nothing you could do to him that he hasn't done to himself. But also, number two, he's going to make you pay for every drop of sweat. He's going to make you pay for every nosebleed he had, every drop of blood that left his body. He's going to make you pay for that. And you know, when you step into the ring with him, that's the mentality that he has, and you're gonna have to deal with that for 12 or 15 rounds.
Now, Paulie, that's what I was about to ask you about. Other than his last three fights, they were all in the 15-round era. Of course, set a record for middleweight title defenses. He was almost built for. When I think 15 rounds, I think Marvin Hagler. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. He ruled the middleweight division with an iron fist. There's a lot of really good middleweights that came around in that era that never became world champions because they had to go through Marvin Hagler. You know, you think of somebody like Mustafa Hamsho, who was a very good fighter and would have probably been a middleweight champion in other eras, but he got to the mandatory position, lost to Hagler, worked his way back into the rankings, got back to the mandatory position because, you know, he was such a good fighter, and guess who's still champion? Hagler, and he lose to him again. You know, so he never got to become a champion, a guy like that. Also, you know, when you think of the scariness of Hagler, you think of the war with Tommy Hearns, you think of, you know, obviously the Leonard fight as well. That he's very famous for that. But you know what I think of when I think about how intimidating Hagler is? His wins over John Mugabe, the beast, all knockout wins, and also
one of my favorite fights.
And I always forget the Argentine's name. Chris, you remember?
Oh yeah,
Roldan. You look at Roldan's KO ratio, and you look at Mugabe's KO ratio, and then you look at not that Hagler beat them, but the way he beat them. He beat them like, bro, you're not man enough for me. I'm gonna go right to you. I don't care who you've knocked out or how scary your punching reputation is. I'm gonna come over here and I'm gonna beat the crap out of you the way you least expected. Everybody else is scared of your punching power. I'm gonna go right to you and beat the crap out of you. And he did that. I mean, the Roldan fight is crazy because it's actually give and take for like a round or two, and he's taking the shots and he's dishing them back to Roldan, and then. He's not below or above bending the rules. He thumbs Roldan in the eye, changes the whole fight around, and then beats the living shit out of the guy for the next round and a half and stops him. You know, after thumbing him, and Roldan can't even see. No pity here, buddy. You got thumbed. We're gonna continue. Now you're down. It's my turn.
It's a fight.
Yeah, and the Mugabe fight. Mugabe, I believe, had 100% KO ratio. He
yes.
Like 20-something and 0 with all 20-something wins by knockout. They named him the Beast. He was an ascending guy. I don't think Mugabe was ever the same after that fight. You know.
No.
Mugabe was a real destroyer, and it wasn't like it was a drag out kind of fight. And this is an older Hagler where a lot of times guys aren't ready for those kind of fights anymore because they've been through the mill already in their career. Nah, bro. It was still a Hagler who was just as hungry as he was before the championship. He mowed Mugabe down bit by bit, broke him and stopped him. And I think that fight went several rounds, right? I mean, it was a decently
11 out of 12.
It was
11 out of 12.
It was a late fight. Yeah.
That's when you've been through so many wars, you're usually mentally checked out of a fight like that. You're usually like, man, I don't know if I can keep going. He willingly gave himself into that fight and stopped Mugabe in a destructive fashion.
unbelievable fighters, and it isn't just about what they did in the ring. It's the way they made you feel walking to the ring. You were scared getting in there, but everyone have a happy, safe Halloween. We love you. Get plenty of candy. We right here, Boxing Scene Today. We'll be here for all your boxing news. Join us. Find out why millions are watching.